What's up, guys? Welcome back to AGV Cars. I'm Aaron here again, and today we're talking about the Spanish Grand Prix of 2015, which just happened a few hours ago. Today is the 10th of May 2015, so we're just going to do some analysis about the race, and I'll tell you what I think of the race. So we're actually going to start on the Saturday in the qualifying session, because a few interesting things happened in qualifying that I think are worth mentioning in the video, because they did have an effect on the race. So first of all, Kimi Raikkonen in the Ferrari qualified down in 7th position and was out qualified by the Williams of Valtteri Bottas and also by both Toro Rossos of Sainz and Verstappen. And there was a reason for this. Of course, he was expected to be up there with his teammate who qualified third. But the reason for the poor qualifying result was that his tyres that he was about to use in the final run in qualifying, the team actually overheated them in the tyre blankets and effectively burnt them. So that is why he was not able to use them and had to go out then on a used set of tyres to do his final run in qualifying, which is why he was down in 7th position. Felipe Massa was also kind of out of position in 9th, and the reason for this was that in Q2, the first run that Massa did was deemed not to be enough to get through to Q3 by the team. They said it wasn't really worth taking the risk being knocked out in Q2, so they sent him back out again to make sure he got into Q3, but then what that meant was that he had less tyres to use in less 3, so they could only do one run, and on that one run Massa had a bit of traffic and also made a slight mistake, which is why he qualified all the way down in 9th. Toro Rosso also had a very good showing. I said that they out-qualified the Ferrari of Kimi Raikkonen, which was very, very strong in 5th and 6th. And then also, of course, a bit more at the top end, Nico Rosberg was able to out-qualify teammate Lewis Hamilton for the first time this year, which is pretty massive because Hamilton has been on pole for the first 4 races of the year, and now for Rosberg to finally have gotten the upper hand will really give kind of a boost to him and knock Hamilton down a little bit, and of course that was what led to what happened today on Sunday. So yeah, in the race we move on to Sunday's action, and Nico Rosberg won the race from pole position, so that pole really helped him and was what was able to allow him to have an advantage in the race. A few things to point out in the race as kind of a general sort of analogy of the race. The action was not great, and I said this in the preview video I did, the link will be in the description for that, by the way, that the action on the track, the entertainment value and the amount of overtakes was not great compared to other races, and that is really because of the Spanish Catalunya track. It doesn't really provoke many overtakes, as there's only really one overtaking place into turn 1. And another thing was the amount of slow pit stops and pit stops that were messed up either by the driver or by the team was quite high. We'll talk about them throughout the video, but just worth mentioning, it was quite a strange amount of accidents and incidents in the pit lane. So yeah, Nico Rosberg won for Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton came second. Nico Rosberg was really untouchable in the race. He drove a flawless race, did exactly what he had to do, got a perfect start off the line, whereas Hamilton had a bit of wheel spin, and Hamilton actually was third into the first corner because the Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel actually out-dragged him to turn 1, where he stayed for a long time in 2nd place. Now, of course, he ended up in 3rd position, almost 30 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton. But for the 1st and 2nd stint, Vettel was ahead and Hamilton was not able to pass him. And then Lewis Hamilton made a pit stop, and his Lewis Hamilton's first pit stop was very, very slow, and he actually made the pit stop before Vettel, so he was trying to get the undercut on him. But because there was a problem with, I believe, the rear left, he had a slow pit stop, and then Vettel was able to regain his second place, and then he wasn't able to pass him for that second stint either. So then what Hamilton did was change to a 3-stop, which was theoretically faster, but then he had to pass more cars. But he did pull that off, and he got the gap he needed to Vettel to be able to pit without losing a place to him. So he finished second position, and then Sebastian Vettel in third. But it was interesting to see what would happen between them. I won't talk about Raikkonen just yet. We'll talk about Williams first, and Valtteri Bottas beat Kimi Raikkonen to fourth position. This was quite an interesting race because Bottas started fourth in the grid and Raikkonen was down in seventh. But Raikkonen quickly made his way past Toro Rosso's up to fifth. And I think Williams knew they had a slower car, so they had to kind of really, really push and try to keep the Ferrari of Kimi Raikkonen behind them. And they were able to do that. Just about. Bottas finished 0.8 of a second ahead of Kimi Raikkonen. And throughout the last, say, 10 laps, Raikkonen was right on Bottas's rear wing and really trying to get past, but wasn't able to. So yeah, Kimi Raikkonen was then in fifth place, and then Valtteri Bottas's teammate Felipe Massa was down in sixth place. He had quite a compromised race because of his ninth place starting position on the grid. So he did make an excellent start. I'd say it was the best start on the grid, as he very often does make a great start. But he was pushed wide at the first corner by a Toro Rosso, and that shoved him down kind of behind Raikkonen again, and a Toro Rosso got past him again, and that really put him on the back foot. And sixth place was the best that he was going to get. And again, we can really see like a tiered system, I suppose, in F1 now. There's Mercedes at the top, Ferrari behind them, Williams behind them, and then it's the best of the rest, which is kind of Lotus, Red Bull, which is how it was today as well, because seventh place was Ricciardo in the Red Bull. He was a lap down in seventh place. The best of the rest, though, and even with the slow pit stop, he was able to stay ahead of the Lotus of Romain Grosjean, who was chasing him throughout the race. Grosjean he had quite a quiet race. We didn't see too much of him, apart from a little collision he had with his teammate, actually, Maldonado, which we'll talk about in a minute. But he had quite a quiet race, apart from when he had quite an incident in the pit lane, which was one of the incidents that we saw today. It was when he almost killed the front track man in the pits. He completely misjudged his braking and almost ran down his mechanics in the pit lane, which but thankfully no one was hurt and they were all able to laugh about it afterwards. Toro Rosso got ninth position with Carlos Sainz. Again, not great pace from Toro Rosso as we've seen in the last few races. Their qualifying pace seems to be a lot better, and then they just kind of gradually fall back throughout the grid, throughout the race rather. And yeah, they really didn't have great pace on either set of tyres today. Red Bull also got their Kvyat into the top 10. He was actually passed, though. He was ninth and was passed by Sainz near the end of the Grand Prix. Then Max Verstappen in the other Toro Rosso was 11th place. Again, quite a quiet race for him. Nothing really happened. And then below them is sort of the next group below Red Bull, Lotus and Toro Rosso. It's the Saubers and Force Indias and the like. And Sauber Sauber really, I don't know, because they started very, very strong in winter testing, and then in Australia they are also quite strong with a fifth place for Felipe Nasr. But since then they just sort of just gradually slipped back. They haven't gotten points in a few races now, and this race they were 12th and 14th with Nasr and Ericsson respectively. Not great. We didn't see a lot of them at all actually on track, and they're kind of fighting with the Force Indias, who finished 13th and 15th, with Perez 13th and Hulkenberg 15th. Again, haven't seen too much from Force India this season. They have said that they want to try to kind of reverse their history in F1, where they start excellent and then sort of just fall away throughout the year. Here they haven't started great, but they hope that they will develop the car throughout the year and be competitive and fighting for points towards the end. Then McLaren had Jenson Button in 16th place, and after a strong qualifying where they both got into Q2, race was certainly not as good. Jenson Button had problems throughout the race, down in 16th, third last of the finishing cars, and just really a lot more work needed for the McLaren Honda. Then Will Stevens and Roberto Merri for Manor Marussia were 17th and 18th, last of the finishers, but they did finish, which they have done for almost all of the races. So 3 laps down for Stevens and 4 laps down for Merri, but reliability is there. They are of course using the 2014 Ferrari engine, so they are down on power and everything, but it is reliable, which is very important. Maldonado then retired. He retired on lap 47. He had contact with Grosjean earlier in the race, as I said, and it had and he got damaged from that on the rear wing, which you've probably seen in the video. There he got one of the end plates on the rear wing was bent, and then at the pit stop they had to pull it off altogether. But and then after that he had other issues which forced him to retire. And then finally, last place was Fernando Alonso at his home Grand Prix. On lap 28 he retired due to a brake issue. He failed to stop into turn 1 on that lap, came in for a pit stop, and also failed to stop for the pit box, just like Grosjean. But the McLaren front trackman had enough wits about him to jump out of the way before he was struck by a McLaren Honda F1 car. So that is the field that finished the Spanish Grand Prix of 2015. Now we will talk about how that shapes the championship standings. And while at the top there isn't any change really, with Hamilton still at the top, 111 points, 20 points back then is Nico Rosberg in second place. Vettel remains in third place with Raikkonen fourth. Valtteri Bottas is after passing Massa for fifth, but they are very close as well. Ricciardo is best of the rest in seventh place. Grosjean then for Lotus. Nasr for the Sauber, both Toro Rosso's 10th and 11th, with Sainz ahead. Both Force India's 12th and 13th, with Hulkenberg ahead. Then Marcus Ericsson and Kvyat both on 5 points. Then we go down to the 2 McLarens of Alonso and Button, 2 Marussias of Merri and Stevens, and Pastor Maldonado of the Lotus, who have still yet to score a single point. As for the constructors' standings, Mercedes are well ahead on 202 points compared to Ferrari's 132, and then Williams is 81. Then Red Bull in fourth, a small bit ahead of the Sauber team, which is a small bit ahead of the Lotus team, which then is a small bit ahead of the Toro Rosso team, who is ahead of Force India in 8th, and then McLaren and Marussia haven't scored a point each. So that is it for the analysis of the Spanish Grand Prix. If I had to pick a driver of the day, I would have to pick Nico Rosberg. He drove flawlessly, he got an excellent pole time, and I cannot fault anything he did this weekend for a change. So let me know who your driver of the day was down in the comments, and I'll see you back on the channel very soon, and looking forward to the Monaco Grand Prix, which takes place in 2 weeks' time. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.